Should kids be allowed at pride parades?
Definitely.
Totally, 100%.
Everyone should be allowed.
Everyone should be allowed.
Yeah.
Okay, cool. Just imagine
As long as they're celebrating and not protesting.
Sure,
Yeah.
sure. Just
Well, in
imagine
that sense,
I've never been, for example. Just for argument's sake, say I've never
You should
been.
go, it's gonna be fun.
Okay. Okay, cool. A lot of the feedback from the culture at Parade is that there's a lot of kink culture. Is that the word? Kink culture?
Yes, that's the word.
There's nudity, whether it's partial or full. It depends on which part of the world you're in, I suppose. I don't know. Adult content. Is that age appropriate for children?
That's a very good question.
In general.
Yeah.
I think it depends on what context, right? I don't think nudity is a bad thing at all. And I don't think that exposure to certain kinks is a bad thing at all either. It's just a part of our world and a part of the conversation you need to have with your children at some point. So I think it's always appropriate depending on the context that you're going to, provide them with.
If someone was to expose themselves to children on the street, should they be arrested?
Totally.
In general?
Expose, you mean like...
During Pride, you mean?
No,
Like
on the
nudity?
street. In general. Any
Well,
part of the world, any country. Whatever the law is.
That's a very tricky question
Yeah,
because
it
it
is a
depends
tricky
on their
question.
mental state. If they're mentally unstable and they're not aware of what they're doing,
Which they probably would be if they were doing that, right?
well, maybe not.
Okay.
What if they're just walking down the street nude? They're exposing themselves to children, but if they're unwell, then they might not necessarily they shouldn't get arrested. They should be taken care of in a different way.
What are your thoughts?
Well,
Context,
I think,
it's all in context.
Yeah, I think it all really depends on context. Obviously, if you go to like nudity beach with your child and you're like, you're teaching a child to be like comfortable in your body, and that's the place to do it, then obviously not. If it's in the context of like day-to-day life on the streets, then questionable, definitely questionable. And I think, I wouldn't want my child to, like, if I would not be ready to like expose my child for that, I would not be happy with it. And I think in that context, on the streets, people should be arrested.
Okay, so same question at Pride. If anyone at Pride was to adult performer, or I don't know how it works, but in terms of someone who's actually not a participant of Pride, but I don't know how it works, but if someone was at Pride and they expose themselves, should they be arrested?
What do you mean by non-participant?
If is there a procession or something like that, a performer? If anyone or anyone,
I perform which
Anyone.
kind of performance though? There can be so many.
I'm not
different
sure I understand the
performances.
question.
any performers. If
And-
anyone exposed themselves to a child at a parade, a
When you
Pride
say
parade,
expose themselves to a child, do you mean a child just happens to see them nude, or you mean goes up to the child, invites them to look at them nude? Because
Either.
that's a very different...
either you can give an answer for both. Either.
Well, my perception to nudity is normal. I grew up with the concept of, there's nothing wrong with being nude. Coming from a European family that were very open. So I think if you just so happen to be nude, it's a different story than if you go up and you try to expose yourself in a sexual way, right?
But if a man, whatever, or female, was to expose deliberately in front of, targeted, if I'm hearing that right, that
Exactly.
would be different.
I would feel like that's a different context.
Would they need to be arrested if they did that?
That is not up to me. That is up to the law, and the laws are different.
Yeah.
And they might, laws often don't apply. Laws are often not. There's no, what's the word I'm looking for? Laws are very, this equals this, right? But there is context, again, in everything. So whether they should get arrested in that scenario, again, there should be many decisions involved.
Because people keep talking about gays exposing themselves, gay people, but at the same time, people don't talk enough about gay people actually being targeted by lots of people that are super aggressive,
Should kids be allowed at Pride festivals?
Yes.
There's evidence and common opinion to say that there is nudity, partial or otherwise, kink culture, adult content at these events. Is that age appropriate for children?
I think it would be very dependent on what you're defining those terms as, but yes, kids run around naked all the time.
If someone was to expose themselves on the street to a child, should they be arrested?
Yes.
Common sense. If someone at Pride Parade exposed themselves to a child, should they be arrested?
If a person that is not covered up walks up to a child and exposes them, then yes, they should be arrested. But if it's in a parade environment where people are expressing themselves and being their full person, and there's going to be nudity, and a parent can decide whether they can take their child there. If you're taking your child to an event where you think there's going to be nudity, you're not then going to be like, oh, someone's exposed themselves to my child. Like, no, that's not going to happen.
Last but not least, Pride has developed over the last 50 years, arguably, incredibly so.
150?
Is there any argument to say that Pride is now normalised and legitimised for certain people, certain demographics, with ulterior motives concerned specifically with children at these parades?
I think that people are trying to use Pride as a argument for protecting children. If you're really worried about protecting children, like, taking them to a Pride festival is not really like the thing that you should be deciding on what is protecting them or not.
Should kids be allowed at Pride festivals?
Yes.
Should kids be allowed at Pride parades?
Yes.
Why?
Because children also should see that there's diversity. Like, if you ask me about this, I'm doing my thesis on teaching kids about Pride. So, yeah, I feel like they should know everything about it.
So at these Pride, so obviously we take both sides of the argument into play, and we see a lot of images of, you'll have seen this as well, scantily clad men and women,
Yes.
and a lot of nudity,
Yes.
and a lot of exposure, kink culture as well, a lot of adult culture. So is that an appropriate place for kids to be in at these Pride parades?
I think it is. I think we're trying to figure out what the parade should be. So I feel like it should fight for our rights, and it should also show things that kids can see. And I feel like there should be a third part for maybe the more adult things. Yeah, I feel like if the law tells you not to get naked any day of the year, then don't get naked on Pride Day. But also
I think that's interesting. So I think that's my question. What's the difference between a grown man like myself exposing myself to a child, for example, and Pride festivals? Based on what we've just explained, what's the difference? Should they be arrested?
No.
They shouldn't.
No, because I mean, I don't know. Maybe I haven't seen all of the Pride parades, but I've never seen full nudity.
Sure.
You can see people dressed with not a lot of clothes, but the things that have to be covered, I've always seen them covered. So you go to the beach and you see the people almost naked. So to me it's the same, because I've never seen anyone fully naked. If people get fully naked, I don't know about that, but I haven't seen it.
So you're saying, sorry, this is last question. This is a key part of the conversation. So you're saying that as long as it's not full nudity at Pride parades, but we've already agreed that there is scantily clad kink culture. There is clearly a lot of flesh on display at family friendly, as branded as family friendly events. If I'm not incorrect, there is there any difference between that and children experiencing that, and a man choosing to flash or expose himself to children? Is there any difference?
Yeah, there is a big difference to me. In my opinion, there's a huge difference.
What's the difference?
One thing is you see somebody, you can maybe expect a bit more nudity. The same way you'd expect something on, I don't know, another festival, you'd expect certain things. You can expect someone to maybe wear less clothes on a Pride parade. But you as a parent or as a family member should be the one who tells the difference. But I don't think, I think they're two different debates, and mixing them is kind of, could be close to homophobia. So I don't want to put them together.
What's the debate when you say the two different debates? So one debate is child safety. When you say there's two debates, which what are the two debates?
One debate is whether people should be getting naked anywhere, and then there's Pride. For Pride, there's a certain context and a certain thing that's happening, and things that happen surrounding it. And maybe somebody, to show their pride, they need to wear less clothes one day. That's one thing, and I feel like on Pride Day, there's a parade and you know that's going to happen. But any day of the year, you don't get naked in front of a kid. But also what I said earlier.
What's the difference? That's the interesting point I think that people want to know about is what's to convince people of this. What's the difference?
I don't think.
Not my opinion, just what's the difference?
No, because like you don't get fully naked on Pride.
No, but it's about. I'm not saying that anyone's getting. I hope not. I hope not. But in the context of it being family friendly, I think that's the context here. I mean, I presume you've been to Pride festivals.
Yeah, and anything. I mean, I think it's the parents that have to choose, and I don't think it's not a family event. And I feel like sexualizing the thing, like making the kids think that's sexual, is even worse. Like if you see somebody naked or not fully clothed, that's fine, but like I do think there's a difference. And if people don't want to see it, they're not gonna see it. But there is a difference, very clear, whether you're showing your pride and expressing who you are, or just like getting naked and making it sexual when it shouldn't be.
Is it appropriate for kids to attend Pride Festival, Pride Parade?
Yes, I think it is, because it's 2023 now, things are changing. I know a lot of people have issues with that sort of community in this day and age, but I just don't think you should try and hide your children from it. I think you should be very open to them knowing about what's going on. They're going to see it regardless, and I think it's about embracing people that are different than us, so yeah, it's no problem.
At these parades there's nudity, partial and otherwise.
Yeah.
What is nudity? Okay, fine. Partial, pretty much. Kink culture,
Yeah.
adult culture.
Yeah.
Do you think this is appropriate content for children?
For me, it does depend. It does depend. It depends what sort of parent you are. To be honest, if I had kids, obviously some people might take offence to it because they're like, oh, you don't have kids, you're young. But if I had kids, for me, like I said, it's about trying to get them to open up to things and not just be close-minded. If some parent doesn't like, their kids being exposed to nudity and stuff, it's fair enough. That is completely fair enough, and you should respect everybody's, opinions. But for me, I think there's nothing wrong with it. If a kid wants to go and is interested in that sort of community, let them experience that. Let them know a bit more about that. There's no point of saying no to children, because regardless, behind their back, they're gonna go and try find out about things like this, aren't they? So it's happening everywhere in this day and age. So
if someone exposes themselves to a child on the street, should they be arrested?
yeah, 100%.
If someone at a Pride festival exposes themselves to a child, should they be arrested?
Yes.
Should kids be allowed at Pride festivals?
Yes, I think they should.
We know there's scantily clad men and women, and we know that there's an artistic scene there as well. Kink culture.
Okay. Didn't quite realise they were there, but okay.
I think that's the expression, kink culture. Just
I know
general
what you
adult.
mean, but yeah.
Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
Just general adult culture. So if someone was to expose themselves to a child, you and I, reasonable people, on the street, we'd want them arrested.
Yes.
Do men and women expose themselves to children at Pride parades?
I don't know.
If they were to,
Yeah.
should they be arrested?
Yeah. Same as everybody else.
It's the same thing.
Yeah.
Is there any argument or defence of that Pride festivals have once what they were, now they've actually become legitimised spaces for certain people to expose themselves to children? Legitimised spaces for that.
You mean do they think that they can?
Whatever they're
Sort
into.
of.
Whatever they're into.
Yeah.
Again, compared with 20 years ago, compared with 5 years ago,
Yeah.
because we see there's a flag everywhere in London at the moment.
Yeah.
Look at Regent Street.
Yeah,
That's not a
exactly.
pride flag, that's a trans, progressive, inclusive
Yeah.
flag. And there's massive problems there with women's rights and women's spaces in terms of the debate.
Yeah.
So what do you think? Do you think that perhaps, what's your opinion, has Pride legitimised the exposing of adult males, potentially females, to children?
No.
No?
No, it hasn't helped in that.
Yeah.
They shouldn't be doing it.
Do I have your consent for the interview?
Yes, you do.
Yes, you do.
Awesome. Do I have your consent for the interview?
Yes.
Fantastic. Do you consent to the interview?
Yes.
First of all, do you consent to the interview?
Yes.
Do I have your consent for the interview?
Yes, you do.